Development Advocacy Network. We are the leading events and webinar platform in African real estate, a platform to connect with stakeholders in the housing industry across the globe. Our platform has over 1,000 live viewers per webinar, over 20 African and international countries. We engage a heterogeneous audience composed of decision makers. With over 120 minutes per webinar, you can reach over 40,000 global and Pan-African audience. Join Nigeria's leading brands, sponsor a webinar episode or series, or host your own webinar through our platform and speak to your own audience. Through our platform, you can reach a new audience composed of real estate developers and investors, property owners and facility managers, banks and financial institutions, construction and civil engineering firms, managing directors and chief executive officers of companies, wholesalers, retailers, property agencies, and even more. For inquiries, call the numbers displayed on your screen. The Housing Development Advocacy Network webinar platform is proudly sponsored by
Good afternoon. This is the 13th edition. This program is proudly supported by Housing Development Program on AIT and Housing Development Program on Television Continental. It is my pleasure to welcome all my very important guest speakers. Before I come to them, I want to welcome all the participants who have been connecting. I can see some people coming in from different parts of the country. I must also acknowledge our partners in the media who are always connecting for the purpose of getting news that they can share with the rest of the world. We are very happy to be back on this webinar discussion. The focus today is housing as a governance tool and legislative response to poverty and disease control. The recent developments around the world concerning COVID-19 has exposed the problem of urban planning. It has exposed the problem of affordable housing. It has exposed a lot of weaknesses in almost all the countries in Africa. This is why we'll be looking at this today. The distinguished Senator Hegu has not yet connected. He just spoke to me that he just left a committee meeting. If any of his people are connected, they should please let him know that he needs to connect, because we have to start the program now. We have just 1.5 hours to spend on this program so that we can do other things. On this program today, focusing on housing as a governance tool and legislative response to poverty and disease control, I have with me a former minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Architect Musa Muhammad Sada, a fellow of the Nigeria Institute for Architects. I will not be able to read all these about 2 pages profile I have here. There is a record that every Nigerian know you as a senior citizen, and it's our pleasure to have you here this afternoon. Architect Sada, you are welcome on the webinar discussion.
Thank you very much.
I also have with me this afternoon the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Infrastructure, leading effort at the presidency to reposition the infrastructure sector of the country, Ime Okon. Ime Okon has previously worked as the project manager, Power Africa, with the United States Agency for International Development. She's an infrastructure expert with over 15 years of experience in various sectors, reforms and privatization. Madam Ime Okon, we have the pleasure to welcome you on this webinar discussion.
Thank you, Festus. It's my pleasure to be on.
You're welcome. Also here this afternoon is the Professor Immaculata Nwokoro of the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Faculty of Environmental Sciences, University of Lagos. Madam, I've gone through your record and I'm so pleased to have you. I don't know where you have been hiding. I'm supposed to have caught you. I've been using you in sort of my advocacy. But thank God that at last I got you. I've been told that the area we are discussing is your area of specialization. Professor Immaculata Nwokoro is a first-class student, a scholar, first-class scholar for urban and regional planning from the Rivers State University of Science and Technology, Port Harcourt. The other degrees obtained a master's in urban and regional planning and a PhD in urban and regional planning from the University of Ibadan. She is a fellow of the Nigeria Institute of Urban Planning. If they've not given you fellow, I've elevated you today. The president is here. I remember I've done that before. When the director, and then is it? Yes. The man in charge of Abuja Metropolitan, the coordinator of Abuja Metropolitan Council, was carrying around the title of associate. And he told me he's an associate member. And I asked him, since when have you been given this title? He said, I've collected more than 15 years. I said, so what's happening? Why are they refused to? And I said, I'll go to the secretariat and collect the form for you. And I remember going to their secretariat. I collected the form. And I was the person that returned the form. And the person who collected the form from me, the secretary, told me, what are we going to do, Festus? You are the one that brought this form now. If we don't act now, you go and tell the world that this is what we are doing. So, madam, if they've not given you fellow, you get to me after this program. But above all, you are welcome on this webinar discussion.
Thank you for inviting me. You have just reported me to my NITP president. But don't worry, I will work hard to become a fellow very soon. I'm not yet one. Thank you.
You are welcome. Also with me this afternoon is Ambassador Haki Oyateru, my mentor, who's also a father to us in the house industry. Ambassador Haki Oyateru is a former Nigeria High Commissioner to Kenya. He's a former permanent representative to UN Habitat and currently a consultant on urbanization and affordable housing. It's our pleasure to welcome Ambassador Haki Oyateru to this webinar discussion today. Ambassador, sir.
Thank you so much, Facilitator Festus. It's a pleasure to be on this webinar discussion when we're discussing one of the very critical areas of our society and our economy. So it's my pleasure to be on this panel. Thanks.
You are welcome, sir. Now, it's my pleasure to recognize, welcome on the program, the president of the Nigeria Institute of Town Planners. I call him the #1 town planner in Nigeria. And it's my pleasure to have him on the program today. TPL Lekwa Ezuta.
Thank you, moderator.
Yes. And before I go on the program, I hope you have heard, I reported Professor, the prof to you, the professor of urban planning, that you have refused to put in the position of a fellow. What are you going to handle that? And that to be your first on the program today.
She has to first indicate interest.
She has to first indicate, so because she has not indicated any interest, that is why you have not given her.
She knows what to do.
So it's my pleasure. #1 town planners, I will follow her up so that she can indicate interest. And because of that, I'll be starting with the professor today. Professor, I want you to be the first person that will speak on this program today, and the subject of focus, housing as a government tool and legislative response to poverty. And I'm going to start with you with a question. Why COVID-19 has a major factor has contributed to the high number of deaths so far? Is it possible that housing conditions are likely to have played an enabling and bigger part in the increasing death rates? As you can see the figures in the last 3 days, it has been coming up. How do we plan and execute for better outcomes in the future? I want you to be the first person from the academic that will start this discussion today before I go to other professionals who are in the field. So you are welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much. Before I go into answering that question, I would just like to give a little bit of background on and amplify the inextricable link between housing, health, and disease, because it is important for us to understand that housing has a link with health and diseases before going into that answering the questions. We know that where we live is at the core of our lives, So for me, I was also hoping that other professionals in core housing would have defined housing by now, but I'll just take it from the health perspective. A healthy housing for me is not just the structure, but it must have certain services that will influence or affect physical, mental, and social well-being of both whether the individual or the families living in the housing. We also know housing is critical because we know that we spend, or most people spend, at least 70% of their time in the houses, particularly the vulnerable group, the women, the aged, the children, and people with disability. Now, this has been intensified by COVID-19. One of the measures that they are telling us to to contain COVID-19, which is stay home and stay safe, meaning that most of us are forced now to stay home, or at least for the past 2 months, many people have been locked down in various cities. And so that is why this is very, very important. Now, it's also important for me to raise some of the housing components that have direct effect with health and diseases. In housing, you have the internal components and you have the external components. The internal components, you talk about size, that's the space within the housing, which, if not large enough, could lead to overcrowding in the houses. You also talk about the structure, how the housing is structured. If the houses do not have cross ventilation, we know that it also has a direct link with health and diseases. And of course, there must be certain amenities that talk about access to water, toilet facilities, electricity. All these are needed to have a healthful housing. The external is about the immediate environment of the house. Now, we'll look at some of these diseases and their channels of contamination or transmission. We can have skin contact, transfer of body fluids, exchanging objects with people that are already affected by the virus, and droplets. For COVID-19, the channel, the WHO told us that the channel for transmission is mostly through respiratory droplets. That is, if you're staying close to the carrier. And then, of course, if you exchange items with somebody that already has COVID-19. So we are battling with poor access to clean water, which is just about 64% in Nigeria. Only 64% of people have access to improved sources of water. Sanitation is even worse, like 30%. Okay, so now, and this we're already having most people, particularly children, dying from diseases related to this poor access to water and sanitation, particularly diarrhea. Now, going to your question, COVID-19 deaths and housing. I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not an epidemiologist, so I cannot speak so much on these deaths, but I can infer that yes, these COVID-19 cases are related, or they have a relationship with, I will want to stay with morbidity instead of mortality, because even the figures and the data we have now, right as of today, we have about just slightly over 11,000 cases of COVID-19 in the country and about 316 deaths. I don't think the data is even enough to give any serious analysis of how these deaths occur. But what we have been told is that most people that are dying have comorbidities. But there could be an indirect link with death, because if we say that they have already comorbidities, and these people live in houses that maybe have poor facilities or that are not helpful. So if they already have those diseases, it means that when they come in contact with COVID-19, it's going to increase their risk of dying. That's what we do, and that's what we have for the figures we have now. So yes, COVID-19 deaths and housing. We know that people that are infected, they live in houses. So the houses are truly the center of spread. If the houses are in good condition, it means that the cases will be low. There will be low incidence of COVID-19. But if the house and also if the houses are in good condition, it means that it will be easy to contain them using some of the measures that we've been told. Social distancing, wash your hands. It will be easy to have accessibility to these neighborhoods so that it can be quickly contained. But that is not the case, because at least above 60% of people live in slums. And these slums, we know where they are located, in very precarious environments, with little or no access to water and sanitation, which are key in containing COVID-19. So yes, what can we do? What can we do? I will be saying that we could have a well-planned neighborhood with amenities, because these amenities are key. They have to be there. They have to exist for people to come out of this, for people to use, particularly water and sanitation. And also, I will be, I think they can also benefit from people-oriented urban regeneration strategy. That will be my major solution. Thank you very much.
That's a very good way to start the program today. You have opened the discussion. And as you have observed, COVID-19 has exposed the whole world, even in America, even Africa, even our country. And that will be taking me now to the senior architect, and that's architect Musa Sada. He was not just only a minister for solid minerals and mine. I remember also seeing him as a minister in charge of works and housing for a period of time during the Jonathan administration. Sir, I want to ask you as a senior architect, COVID-19 rule says there must be self-distancing. A man who is in poverty, has wife with 10 children. They are living in one room in Masaka. How are they going to obey this self-distance? I remember the commissioner for Health in Lagos once said that if you are living in a congested room, you should be wearing face mask every time. I don't know how possible that will be, but I want to put it to you, sir. As a senior architect, are you seeing a link between housing and disease? Are you seeing a link between housing and poverty? Can housing be used to transform our people out of poverty? What do you think is the way forward? Assuming you are in power now, what lesson have you learned and what will you do at this very crucial period?
Well, thank you very much, Festus. And I want to start by giving my regards to His Excellency the Ambassador. We worked briefly in Kenya. It was quite an interesting meet. It's a great personality. It's a great pleasure to meet you once again. Now, going back to your question, I think the first and most important thing that we need to look at is to look at the concept of housing itself and the need for those standards that we need to put in place to say that someone is really housed. One of the best definitions of housing quality is the indoor air quality barometer. Everything that you do in a house, the material you use to build it, how you plan it, how you straight it, how you orient it, it is all geared towards having very good indoor air quality. And we are now dealing with a pandemic that have no respect for any level of such standard in housing for it to be able to be curtailed. Now, occupation density is, as you referred to, the number of people in a place. That's a problem. That's the biggest problem we have. And to me, the first and most important lesson we need to learn from this is that we have to take very seriously and go back to our own housing policies. We have had experiences with various policies right from colonial times to date. If you take the trend, you'll find that at every point in time, our housing policies are hardly holistic. They are always geared towards one small solution. And up to date, this is what it is coming to. We look at housing solutions, for instance, now in a state, a governor will build maybe in a period of 8 years that he served, will build 3,000 houses, and he will be hailed as having done something. But how does that affect what you've just said? You have 6, 7 people living in a small apartment in a room, and then you are now asking for this. We never expected this to happen. But what it exposed us to is the weakness of our own standards,
yes,
of our own policies,
yes,
that we need to go back to. So if we have to learn anything from this going forward, is that not just this, any disease will ravage us if we play around with our housing policies. Because the housing policies are supposed to give us standards, standards that will make livable places good enough for human beings. Some of those places are not good enough for human beings. And we are not looking at it as some of the areas that we need to pay attention to solve this problem. I thought one of the critical requirements of attending to this pandemic is for us to have a side committee that will start looking at the housing standards. How this is the long-term solution to this. We have to look at, if you now come to the GRAs and this and start, they can do distancing, they do this, but these 10 people that goes back to these places, they will go back to something that is substandard. So how do we now take care of this in the long run? We must have to look at our own housing standards, establish qualities, look at the policies that we have in place. How do we now look at it? COVID-19 related, how do we How do we go to those standards? How do we start working on them? We have to start somewhere. We have to start at a point. Like the locations that you mentioned and this, yes, they are there. We have seen them on television, crowded, so many people in one place, even during the day when they are trading. This is how they. But I have not seen us going to those places, and based on the experiences that we have. From the look of it, we are saying this COVID-19 issue it's looking like a marathon. It's not going to be a dash. It's going to be a marathon. Looking at those issues, those things that in the long run will provide for you the solutions. We are not looking at that. The way we are looking at it is that it's now going back to the communities. People have to take care. How do you take care of yourself if at the end of the day you wore the face mask, you to the market, to your workplace, to this, and then you go back to your one-bedroom apartment and you have to sleep with your 5 kids and your wife? How does that all the, no matter how well you're taking care, you have now failed in this. So I think one of the things that I would strongly suggest and advise, possibly the PT of the task force to start looking at, is to start a long-run planning for this. And this we can only sort it out appropriately if we start looking at the housing condition that our people live in. The standards are simply not there. If you take the population of our people, more than 80% are not living in good enough conditions to be able to even do the basic control that we have been distancing this. You are just talking, when you're talking about that, you are talking to 10-15% of the Nigerian population. And the major population the larger population that we have issues with their housing conditions. And we are not talking about the housing condition. So what I want us to do is we have to start looking, how do people live? How do they live? If you don't pay attention to how they live, you are not likely to eradicate this in the very near future. Because no matter what action you take, people will still go back and live together, and then transfer it from person to person. And then before you realize, it becomes a vicious cycle that we need this. So the standards, the quality. Of course, when you're talking of housing, you're not just talking of the dwelling unit. You're talking of the environment. You're talking of the infrastructure that is there. Because this is sometimes some of the mistakes we make when we are defining housing. You just look at it as a dwelling unit. No, it's not a dwelling unit. And this is why even one of the major problems we have is that we don't look at housing as a critical basic infrastructure. This we must have to start looking. Housing is key. As you want your roads, you have to have your houses, you have to have the power, housing is in the middle, there in the middle, as a critical infrastructure that must be paid attention to if we have to solve our health problems, our social problems, our economic problems.
Thank you, sir. You have you have not disappointed me.
I want to control myself.
You have done well. I expected that. Really is the issues you have mentioned are very pathetic. I've had reasons to visit many housing estates in various parts of the Federal Capital Territory, and what I saw are not encouraging. I think it was yesterday somebody also called me and said he wanted to buy a property somewhere. He couldn't even get access to the place. And I remember the other time I was advertising a particular housing estate. And the caller came in and said, Festus, I have just paid for 2 bedrooms in that estate. Unfortunately, when I went there, the room could not even enter. I couldn't put my bed inside. These are issues. These are problems. And that will be taking me very soon to the president of Nigeria Institute of Town Planners. They have been talking of standard professionalism, and they are the one in charge of development controls. He will be telling me what is happening, what are the planning issues, because this issue of COVID-19 has also raised the issue of planning. So I will be coming to him. But Hector Standard has said it. It is time to start focusing on standard. And I think people are here, I'm sure, if there's no if there's nobody to tell the Presidential Committee on Housing, by the time we put this report on television, they will hear. They will know why housing is very crucial. You tell them to stay at home when they don't even have a place to stay. You tell them to do self-distancing when the house is not even fit for such thing. So it has exposed us to know now that housing is key. And we must also know, just as Architect Sada said, you can't separate housing from infrastructure. They go pari passu. It's not about just building a block. No. I think the first person that told me that statement was Professor Akimabo Guje. He told me, you can't separate housing from infrastructure. They go together. Let me now go to the president of Nigerian Institute of Town Planners. TPL Legwas. And I'm sure you should be worried at this present time. What you are seeing in your location in Abia State. I'm sure you should be worried at the issue of COVID-19 has raised serious issues on this urban planning. And then you listen to what Professor Immaculata said. She raised a lot of issues. No water. You said they should wash their hands when there's no water provision. So this is critical. So what exactly can we say as a town planner, number one town planner in this country, what can you firstly tell us your concern? We are discussing housing, poverty, disease. We need to hear from you as a town planner because you are the first point of contact. Architects, before the architect can do anything, even before the engineer can do anything, you are the one that will work on their papers. You are the one that will say this is that. So it is what you approve that they develop on. Tell us the situation, how it bothered you, and what do you think is the way forward?
Thank you, Professor. I'm pleasantly surprised that you talk of planning being what should come first. Housing in Nigeria, shelter. Then that leads us to talking about finance. How do we finance the construction? How do we give money to developers? How do we get money to off-takers to pay for mortgage? Most often, we never discuss the location of those houses. And this is very, very crucial. That is why now we are having the lower middle class, the low-income class, moving away from the city centers, away from where there are places of employment is, and stay in overcrowded places that are now constituting a problem with respect to COVID-19. I think the first thing we should do is to go back to planning so that we're able to locate activities, places of employment, schools, hospitals, as appropriate in relation to where people live, bearing in mind their level of income. Because even if you have, what we call here low-income houses, affordable housing, and you locate it at a distance from the person's place of employment, the tendency is that he will spend so much money on transportation that over time he may either he may have to relocate. Either where he is paying less in terms of transportation or where he is paying less in terms of the rent. And this causes a lot of problem for residents of our cities. So planning, we should go back to planning first before we start talking of any other thing. We should also talk of upgrading the slums. A lot of people are in those places, not out of choice, but because they have no alternative. The government must see housing as both an economic venture and also a social activity. People have to be housed. People have to have where they live. Right now, we are talking about there is this lockdown. Everybody is back home. Some people don't have home. Others can't even maintain the social distance we are talking about in those places because they are just not conducive. So we need to go back to these very vulnerable people, the people who are living in the slums. We need to have a second look at these slums, see how we replan them so as to upgrade them, and then in planning, of course, planning is action based on purpose. We should be planning before we start talking of these houses. Where are they being located? Each time we talk about housing in this country, I get worried because there is overemphasis on finance, and not where these houses are located, the environment in which they are located. When I'm talking about the environment this time, I'm talking about the infrastructure, the facilities, the services. If you want me to stay in a place, it must be conducive. I must have the facilities, water, light, access road, light and water. This should be basic. Then my children should be able to get to school on time without much difficulty. I should be able to access health facilities without much difficulty, and so on. So that is why we need to look at our cities again. We need to plan for the future, replan the existing places so as to ensure we have the basic facilities at the appropriate locations. I repeat, basic facilities, services, and so on at the appropriate locations. Very, very important. It will influence the affordability of these houses. If I'm staying in a place where I don't spend so much going to work, my disposable income immediately increases, then I will be able to afford a house I may not have been able to afford. This is my take for now.
Thank you, my president. Now, that's a great point from you. I do not expect less than what you have said. I'm sure you should be bothered, and I'm aware you have called me more than 2 times, drawing my attention that we have been paying too much attention to finance. Festus, finance. We are not considering about planning. And I remember you even did that to me before the arrival of Mr. COVID. So I think I have reasons now to listen to you on that issue of planning, that we need to give it more attention.
Festus, thank you very much for the question. Yes, I heard your question. Thank you very much for it. I'd also just like to point out before I go straight to the question that, traditionally, construction and the real estate sector has over the years been very central to the economies of most countries, especially the developed world. So where we see the construction industry contributing about 30 to 70% to the GDP. But unfortunately, in climates like ours, we've seen the last check I did was the Q3 of 2019, where we see that construction and real sector contributed about 3% to GDP. So there's potential for growth in that sector. So it's only logical that any government will prioritize, construction through mass housing development in order to, improve the contributions to GDP. So yes, the government is prioritizing, and you will see it in different policies that we're currently implementing. So for instance, we see the Ministry of Housing is implementing national housing projects, which requires them to build houses across Nigeria in all the 36 states. But I think so far, as at the last count, they built about 32 in 32 states of the Federation. So that's like a test pilot where they've tested, how people will take the fact that they were building, the models they use, and the kind of amount of money that will be charged for those houses. So right now, I think they're probably in the last phase of trying to, prepare bids for Nigerians to be able to bid for those houses. So other policies that we've also put on the ground as, brought up initiatives and programs like the Family Homes Fund. And your platform, I see, has discussed severally on the benefit of having the Family Homes Fund And that's one program that the country is very proud, and we're hoping that through the construction of mass housing, it will help, to bring social housing, affordable housing, and also create job opportunities for young people across Nigeria. The president has consistently said that is our priority, that we're going to lift Nigerians out of poverty. So we've identified the construction through mass housing as a way for us to, uplift Nigerians from poverty. So having said all this, we also know the CBN has intervention in the housing sector. We brought out NMRC. We see all what we're trying to do on the foreclosure law, all the reforms we're trying to achieve in the land titling sector. So we prioritize housing. It's not new, because we see the potentials in the housing sector, and we going back also to past policies. We see a situation where past government has also prioritized mass housing through the National Infrastructure Master Plan, and then this present administration built on the National Infrastructure Master Plan through the ARGP, where the construction and real sector was also prioritized. We also have a situation where right now, under the chairmanship of the Vice President, they're currently, coming up with a program on mass housing in one of the reports for the economic sustainability team. So the pointers are there that the government recognizes the importance of housing to the sector. So while we're doing and implementing all these policies, we also have to now sit back to see how has COVID-19 impacted, or how will it impact, these policies that we have on ground that we're currently implementing. And if I take you back several years ago, where the world woke to the fact that we have to adapt our lifestyle to climate change. Climate change is just, for me, I feel COVID-19 and climate change, they are synonymous, but just COVID-19 is a bit more, deadly, people die out of it and all of that. But if you check climate change through flooding and all of that, you see lives are also lost. Where we had to get to the realization, or come to the realization, that any investment we do in infrastructure, we have to climate proof. Climate proof in the sense that the monies I put to build my power plant, if there's a climate-related issue, would that power plant be resilient to that condition? Yes, no. If you don't show that the investment will be climate-proof, you're not going to have investors, pay or buy into that business. So for me, this situation has brought us to the table where we also have to have this kind of thinking. Are we going to COVID-proof, or do we have to start looking at all the policies that we have on the table? And if we put them to test, how many of them can survive the proofing in terms of COVID-19? How far would they survive? Recently, you are aware, in 2018, the government also approved the Review Building Code. And the Review Building Code, the National Building Code, it was a response to the insistent building collapse that we saw across Nigeria. So the ministry, led by the Minister of Works, Babajide Fashola, reviewed the code to ensure that there were stopgap measures and punitive measures if professionals and people that are working in the construction industry do not follow the laid down procedures in the building code. So maybe now this COVID has given us the opportunity to also go back to that document and see, how is our building code, how will it survive the test of COVID-19? Do we have to go back there to say, okay, do we have all the construction, all what we are proposing, the ventilation line, the right places, the lighting is proper, and is that code able to help us build an environment that will strive and at the end of the day just probably flatten the curve for any infectious disease. So that there's an opportunity for us to do that. And then there's also an opportunity for us to look at a national housing policy. Luckily, we're currently working on that right now, trying to review the national housing policy. So we have opportunities to also look at those documents and see how we can, COVID-proof those documents. The 2012 Urban and Regional, the roadmap for the urban and development policy, it's also a good time for us to look at it. Is it properly, structured? Can we expose it now to communities? Can we, engage the community to help us look at the review and see if it, takes into cognizance how they live and what we see in those communities that are, affected by COVID-19. So for me, I see COVID-19 as an opportunity where the government can bring all our policies, regulations, and test it and see if we go in front of, an investor that wants to invest in the housing sector, would it pass the test of a COVID proof on it? So it's for me, I think it's something we should really drill down on, because it gives us an opportunity to do more where we haven't, and then where we have, also step back and continually review to ensure that all our policies are responsive to the present pandemic that we are currently addressing.
Thank you, Madam Umeokon. You have really showcased what your government is doing in the area of housing. And I'm happy you raised this issue, building code versus COVID-19. My mind, you just draw my attention to it. I think it is time for me to ask some questions from those members of that committee. Though I'll be asking from them, where is it? I want to see the draft. Because the National Assembly is waiting for the final draft from them. So if any of them is watching this webinar, we are asking, where is the building code draft? We need to follow it up at the National Assembly. We have been relating. I just got a message from Senator Sam Egu on this same subject matter, who's supposed to join us. And he just told me now that since he's not able to join, since he just finished a committee meeting, I should organize a special webinar for him and his colleague in the House of Reps to respond to matters like this. And that I will do. I will do that. I will ensure I bring them up here next week and then put them on television from here. COVID-19 versus building code. Architect Musa Sanda has raised an issue that standard should not be compromised. It is time for us to look into that. It is time for us to look into our housing policy. So if we have one that has not even been passed into law, we need to go there. We must all go there together. And now I will be going to Ambassador Akin or Yateru. You are in the UN Habitat as a permanent secretary. I want to ask you today, because we ran into a problem during this COVID-19 lockdown. There's no data, no information. We don't even know how many carpenters, how many bricklayers, how many welders are living in Akko that we need to give palliative. To support them, we don't even know where we can get them. At a particular time, they were coming up with threats that poverty virus is worse than COVID-19. So the big men should allow them to go and get their daily bread. But by the way, there's no information about them. There's no data about our artisans. So I want to throw it to you. What is the role of advocacy and data in formulating new policies on slum upgrading, and urban renewal? Ambassador Akin Oyatere.
Thank you. Thank you so much, moderator. Let me thank Mr. Sada for your very kind words. I recall the very fond memories, the very active and fruitful collaboration we had when you were the supervising Minister for Housing, and both in UN Habitat and the Shelter Africa. It's a pleasure to see you on this panel. Now, I've listened to all the discuss various aspects and strands of housing in Nigeria. But I think to start with, we have to look at it from a holistic perspective. And when you're talking of holistic perspective, you're talking of urbanization, of which housing is a component. Now, if we go back to the third United Nations Conference on Urbanization and Human Settlement, Habitat 3, in Quito, Ecuador, 2016, they came out with an outcome document, which is called the Quito Declaration. And then linked to that is the United Nations SDG, and the SDG 11 in particular, that deals with, urbanization. Why am I talking about these two documents? Our problem has always been we take one aspect that is pressing now, attend to it, and we do this thing in not an uncoordinated manner. So the first thing you want to talk about is, what is your urbanization policy? Because it's from your urbanization policy, you are able to distill your housing policy, able to distill other things that has to do with housing. And like TPL Lekot said now, housing is not just issue of just mortar and bricks. Urbanization is now a holistic concept, which is an economic enhancer. We're talking of sustainable economic development. And urbanization can fulfill this role. And we should look at it from that perspective. For instance, urbanization has many strands. So instead of looking at it only as a social model, which has been what has hitherto been the practice, you have to start looking at urbanization now as an economic model that is, a work, a creator, is a job, a creator. It gives, a lot of social, economic welfare. Talk of slum upgrading, urban renewal. You talk of the issue of even urban legislation, talk of urban crime. So you talk of so many things that can be distilled from this. So what I would say is this: it is just good that our national urban policy and national housing policies are being reviewed simultaneously, because this is where we can now make a lot of fresh input into what we need to do going forward. Now, to your specific question of the issue of, yes, many people wanting the lockdown to be lifted and they needed to end their livelihood and they couldn't sustain that anymore. Now, if you look at the issue of our national housing policy, we have to look at the issue of the legislation that is dealing with mortgage as well. You must look at housing within the sector of urbanization, and that brings us to equal the issue of infrastructure. Like Architect Musa said, you are not just thinking of just the dwelling itself. You are thinking of the air quality, the livability of the place, and then you're talking of the issue of, basic services and amenities. So all these have to be planned together. And like TPL Lekot said, you have to talk of the issue of, many other things that go with urbanization, like the mode of transport, your schools, your economic centers, where do you put your industries, where do you put your offices, where do you situate your markets? So all we have to do here is to look at it. For instance, is that anybody who is working should be able to get a house around the area where they work. And that means redistribution of your facilities, and then remodeling the type of housing policy you have. You have to have mixed housing, where you can have various, level of housing from low to medium to high income. And all those housing, estates you are building now should be accessible, both primary and secondary roads. They must have health facilities, they must have schools, they must have recreation centers and the rest of them. Look at a city like Abuja. Before Abuja could have been opened up, we should have had the issue of light rails resolved. All before Abuja was, populated to this level. We should have settled the issue of satellite towns, the issue of, water, the issue of sanitation. All this should have been the things you settle. Because if you don't do them, well, they have economic costs. And then it becomes very difficult for people to actually operate within that area. So when you are talking of the issue, now data. Now we come to data. You can't do much without data, because the question is this: up to now, we're not too sure of what is the exact number of housing deficit that we have in Nigeria. And then what sort of houses are we talking about? The location. Are we talking of in the urban areas? Are we talking of in the rural areas? Then in the slums, how many people are actually in the slums? Because until you know that, before you then know how you are going to upgrade the slums. So if you are talking of, if you don't know the number of houses deficit you have, how do you know how many houses you need to build and the types you need to build, the categories? Then how do you source for funds? Then going with data equally has to be the issue of advocacy. For instance, if you go to a slum, many people don't see anything wrong with their living condition. So until you make them know that it is not healthy for them to live in that situation before they start appreciating that they actually need a solution. If you're not aware that you have a problem, you don't desire a solution. So it's only when you know that you have a problem, you desire a solution, and the type of solution you desire has to be evidence-based. And if it's going to be evidence-based, it means you must have sound policy. And sound policy has to be predicated on predictable, verifiable, actionable data. And this is what we need. So the first thing I would say is that we need a national housing survey of what is the housing deficit in Nigeria, the category of all these houses. Then when you go into the housing sector itself, then you have to talk, you talked of the issue of the artisans. How many artisans do we actually need? You know, in various categories, I talk of plumbers, electricians, masons, and every other person you need. Now, you can generate a lot of, create a lot of job here, create a lot of wealth, and then even capacity building, where we can build more vocational schools to train the artisans that we need. So data is very, very important. Without reliable data, you cannot plan well. Thank you.
I want to appreciate you and your advocacy. I think we are going to draft you into our advocacy. We officially write you. I know you will not like to shout the way we have been shouting. We say it the way it should be mentioned, but it will be at our back. You'll be giving us ideas on the way to go about it. So I want to appreciate your contributions. Let me at this point also acknowledge, for the benefit of my colleagues who are in the media, the great gesture of the Cross River State Governor, Governor Hdan. Is this video reports on which has gone viral. We'll be showing it on our TVC program on Saturday by 10:30 a.m. We are going to sustain showing that video for like 3 weeks to tell the whole Nigerians that more governors need to join Governor Hdan. CFO has been given to those poor people that are living in the IDP in Calabar. We need more governors to use housing to address poverty problem in Nigeria. Now, I will be going to Professor Immaculata. Madam, my question at this point is this. It has been widely recognized that housing is a public health issue across developed and developing countries. What can be done in Nigeria in terms of legislation and policy action to make recommendations in Nigeria? What do you think? What do you think can be done in terms of legislation and policy action?
Okay, just permit me to say a little bit on housing being an infrastructure, making a conscious effort on housing provision, because this is really key. And I want to join other speakers to say a strong yes to it being made a conscious infrastructure. Because I'm talking about healthful housing here. If people stay in houses that are healthful, it means they will have less expenses on healthcare. There will also be higher productivity from individuals. And of course, this will automatically contribute to the growth of the GDP. There will also be less absenteeism from people, because people will be healthy, they'll be strong enough to go about their economic activities. So yes, it should be, but my problem is, how dedicated is government? There should be more factual in housing provision, because we know the history of housing provision in Nigeria. It hasn't really been palatable. So it should be less political. They should be dedicated. They should mean it. It should be serious, because where you have majority of people, homeless people, many people in informal settlements, there's no way we can continue like this. So when they say it, they should mean it. That's my own contribution to that. And I'm happy Ime has mentioned a lot of policies. So legislations abound on housing. I'm not sure we are really lacking legislation, but probably some of them should undergo some review to take care of, of the current realities. Particularly now we are seeing viruses like COVID. This one really hit us. So if we have legislation that can, accommodate all these recent events, that would be nice. But whether we have legislations, we have planning laws, we have environmental health laws, we have the housing policy, which is undergoing review now. We have water and sanitation laws. All these can help us, in improving housing in the country. Now, my own view on how to solve this problem, because there is a disconnect between housing and health policies. That is very obvious. So the ambassador has mentioned, a holistic approach, which I totally agree, that there should be an integrated approach to these problems. Okay, integrated, that involving all levels of government, MDAs, NGOs, CGAs, so many, all the people that have contribution to make in, housing provision, housing improvement in the country. Everybody, it should be integrated, it should be total. These individual sectoral approaches have not worked for us. So it is time to really come together and see what we can do to salvage what is on. I will also want, of course, an improved access to water and sanitation. I'll keep, saying this, I'll keep emphasizing it, because it is key for health. It is key for health. For me, this is very key. Then there could be housing improvements. When we are talking about slum upgrading in some areas, we can also talk about housing retrofitting in some areas, because this will help us in some houses. Now that we are talking about social distancing, in some houses, if we do a retrofitting, that means we may be increasing the size, the space in the house, maybe adding more rooms, and of course, opportunity to add amenities that are non-existent so far. So we can have supportive housing for the less privileged, for all these informal settlements. We can offer such supportive housing for them. I think that will go a long way, because there is no way people can remain healthy in such slum conditions with precarious environment, unhealthy conditions. It is not working. And so if we don't do that, today is COVID-19. We don't know what will come tomorrow. So this is time to really sit up. The government of the day should sit up. They should take it as a, in fact, I don't want to use the word war, but housing provision has become very, very key.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. I think you have, let me move to, I appreciate that your submission. You keep emphasizing the need for water and sanitation. Sincerely, these are very necessary. The other time, Leland Faha, the UN Special Rapporteur, was in Nigeria. He met with me at the Transport meeting. We had a meeting. And I even requested from her if I can take her to the minister or any of the senior government officials. She turned it down. She said I should just interview. I said I should just give my whole report of the housing sector in Nigeria. And I gave her the report. I discovered that even before I see anything, she already had information. She was in Lagos. She visited some of the bad slum areas. She saw people where people were living, 10 people were living in a room. And he came up to say the government of Nigeria is not doing more in the area of housing for its people. So I understand what you are saying. We need water. We can't be saying they should be washing their hands when there is no water in their area. Sanitation. Thank you, FCT. FCT have decided to take the battle on the issue of sanitation to some areas in the FCT. This is key. Who is doing this? How do we achieve a better orientation in suburb? In Abuja, majority of the people, only the big men live in the city. Majority of the people live in suburb. I remember there was a time I brought somebody from World Bank who asked me, Professor Oti, he said, if you have NNPC in the center of FCT, you mean somebody that is living in a massacre will be coming to this every morning. He said, this is reason why we are having hold up every day. So I will be going to to Architect Musa Sada now to ask him, what do you think is the new lesson that the architect or the architecture family has learned from COVID-19? And I also need you to tell me, what do you think is the way, what do you think is the way forward for Nigeria housing sector? But before you answer me, I need to let you know that there's this argument that says that if you spend much to provide affordable housing for your people, you are not likely to spend much on their health condition. So I need to hear about that. Is there any correlation? If people are living in a healthy housing, using the word of professor, are they likely to be going to hospital, or the propensity for them to be going to hospital will reduce? So I need Architect Musa to please shed some light as a senior architect on this subject matter. Pumping money into housing will reduce your expenses of people hospital bill. I don't know whether it is true, but let me ask you.
Thank you, Festus. I think to start with, I would say that your last statement is true. But in trying to answer your other questions, I would want you to just have a cast back on the policy trends as far as housing is concerned. One thing will be very clear to you. At a point in time, government started introducing the private sector into the housing delivery systems of the country.
Yes.
And from there, what happens? Government started withdrawing slowly. As we are now, those draft policies that are due for review, if you look at them, you will find that the bulk of the work in housing delivery in the country is likely left to the private sector. Now, what is the objective of the private sector? Returns on investment, profit making.
Yes.
Then what as far as housing policy is concerned, as far as government is concerned, what role are they supporting? Their role should be social.
Yeah.
Government should come in and support the less privileged to be able to house themselves properly.
Yes.
Now, unless you balance these two objectives, you are not likely to get the result that you want. And this is why I was smiling when the president of the Institute of Town Planners was talking about finance. Yes, why not finance? Because the delivery system is left to the private sector, and the private sector has its objective. That is why they have to keep talking finance. So what we need to do is this policy review that we're doing. I really had hoped the chairman of the House, of the Committee on Housing in the Senate, distinguished senator here, it would have been something that we really need to discuss. If we are reviewing these policies, the role of government and the role of the private sector must be put on the balance. and see what role will government have to play. Government must subsidize housing for the low-income group in Nigeria. It doesn't necessarily mean taking money and putting it like they are doing in the petroleum sector. No, there are many things. The discussants have said so many. His Excellency, the Ambassador, have made mention of very nice areas. You can subsidize the housing. Start an immediate urban upgrade program for the country, and start going into those slums and see how you support them. You don't have to go and build fantastic roads with street lights and this. There are some basic things that if you put in there, the health issues, the transportation issues, and the rest of them will all come to fore. And we left these things way back. This is why when we were planning the issue of the monorail, the ambassador was talking about, yes, what to have been. And so many people will be surprised to know that Eagle Square is supposed to be the station for the monorail for Abuja, and that's where you have Eagle Square. So these are some of the issues that we can't keep remembering and feeling bad about them, but we have to address them on the current situation that we are in now. What we need now for both the health, the security, and the infrastructure issues is to start a massive urban infrastructure program for the country, not just for Abuja. Because these problems are all over. The larger percentage of the people live in those places that we have massively these problems exist. And this is what we need to do to be able to listen. As an architect, if you are trying to look at these problems, it's multifaceted. And like I said, I'm from the school of thought that the house is the quality it provides for you to live in. It's not the fanciful things that you put in it. Sometimes people don't even know. Some of those fanciful things have certain emissions, and this, you put paint that you don't know the impact of the paint on your health and the rest of it. And then at the end, you're always having headaches. And so these are some of the issues that we need to go back to the basics. But for us to be able to have and satisfy the majority of the citizens of this country in terms of standard housing provision, government cannot avoid subsidizing it. And it is the framework for putting in the subsidy to provide the house that the housing policy issues need to look at critically. We're not saying that you throw in the money to this and that this one is building houses, or we are discounting this. All those things, the way we do things, it will go round and end up, giving it to somebody who does not necessarily need it. The problem we have in government housing provision is that of equity. We lack it. And this is why, if you do a housing program now done by government, at the end of the day, because of the inequitable implications of the way it is handled, you may end up creating more landlords than satisfying people that need the houses because of the issues that are involved. So I think one of the ways that we can really subsidize the housing program state is by integrating the housing itself as a critical infrastructure. If you're building roads, your thinking should also be towards how do you use that road to leverage on providing housing that you are now providing an access from one location to another location. How do you provide housing since you now have the road and the time travel from there to possibly some other locations where people go to work is there. So you look at it, prepare land that you can, if you have railway stations, you have stations around there. We now have railway lines coming up. Have we seen any attempt to look at housing? You go to other countries. Every railway station you go, there is a small village there. If you check, you find that it is the station that created the village. So these are some of the thinking that we need to do in terms of this integration and the housing policy that we need to do. We must have a very serious stakeholder engagement. Unfortunately, when we try to identify the stakeholders, we tend to look at the stakeholders as the people around us. No. If you want to solve housing problem, you must start going to the community-based organizations. These are the people that know the poor people that are within the religious organizations, like that, the cooperative groups and so on. You need to bring them as a critical stakeholder group when you are taking decisions on the housing, because you will end up with all your policies solving the problem of 15-20% of the population of the country, while 80% are by the side and having problems. And these problems is what will now start transferring all the pandemics and these things, because they live within you. You don't take care of them. Whatever whatever is happening to them, that gets back to you. And this is precisely what we have with the COVID-19 thing. Most of the people that we see, yes, we feel bad about the way they live, but these are people that we go to the market together. These are people that we enter buses together. So these are some of the solutions that we need to start really getting holistic. Just like the ambassador said, our urbanization policy and our housing policy must come together and be able to address these problems properly. So the other issue that you talked to me about, the architect, it actually addressed the building code. The building code is what the architect gives the architect standards that they need to do. The building code has been around and running around for quite a very long time. At a point in time, the argument was that we need to get the National Assembly to establish penalties for violation of those codes. And it kept going and coming. We are not able to do. So even if we have the code, a code is not a static document. It's a dynamic document. Yeah. Even what we have now, without having to go and start looking over it and the rest of it, we should make sure it starts functioning as a working document. And as it is going on, we now see those areas that it falls short of what we require and make amends on them. But we have to start something. But putting it into work, into practice must also come along with penalty. Because if you put the standard and there is no penalty for violating it, this is why we have all the building collapses, and this is because there are no penalty. If you have a building collapse, you go there, you see a structure, pick up the reinforcement rod. What are the sizes? Check your code. What size does it there? This, whoever put this in there is guilty, and this is punishment. So people will be careful. So in your last question to me as an architect, I think what is important is that we must have the urban development and the housing policies properly articulated. And when we articulate it, we must make sure that we look at all the critical stakeholders that are supposed to be a party to this document. And we must not make sure that at the end of the day, a larger percentage of the population of the country are counted as stakeholders. If the Senate is going to have it doesn't have to call the members of Hdan and the professional bodies and this. No, go to the communities. Let the churches, the mosques, the community-based organizations come up. You know, if you have the villages and this, inform associations, come and talk to this. What can be put in there that will protect your interests? That this. The countries that were successful in solving their housing problems, government played a very critical role in getting them to get there. It is not a business thing. There is also the social aspect of it and the responsibility of government to be able to deliver certain services to this. And this is why housing must be a critical infrastructure for the government to attend to. It is when it is looked at as a business article that some people can go and do business with. This is what creates the problem. You end up solving the problem for just a small percentage of the population of the country, while the issue of the COVID-19 is a critical pointer as to what can happen if you don't give cognizance to the larger population of the people that you are supposed to look at. So to me, one of the things that we need to do is to put this, one, we must have the correct policies that geared towards solving the problems that we identify. And two, for the architect and housing standards and this, we must have the codes, and people must be punished for violating those codes. Unless we are able to do that, we are not likely to see the light of the day as far as these problems are concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Architect Musa Sada. Imagine you spend only a few months, maybe about 2, I can't remember whether it's 2 or 3 months, coordinating the activities in the Ministry of Works and Housing. And in the course of that, we met Ambassador Yateru. And today, His Excellency is saying great thing about you. Oh God. I wish you had spent 2-3 years. I think the story would have been different. I think this is another issue we have to look into the other day. How do we make our Ministry of Works and Housing deliverable? I know they are delivering. I think Madam May have told us number of houses they are building everywhere, and I keep asking them. I want to see the houses. I remember when the minister was going, Minister Fasola, and I was forced to present a report concerning him. I said, no houses have been delivered. Because I could not see them. I'm an advocate. I'm not coming to the ministry for contract or job. I have no business there. So that's a fact. I don't have file there. I don't have file in the Ministry of Housing. My job is what I'm doing. So now we're going to the number one town planner in the country. Architect, town planner Lekworth, are you here? Are you with us?
I'm with you.
President, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
My question to you now is this. What is the future from planned settlement and the government strategy to tackle overcrowding in housing? To tackle overcrowding in housing. Future. What is the future from planned settlement? You are number one town planner in the country today. Tell us.
Thank you. Let me begin by thanking the ambassador for articulating the issue of housing very, very well. How I wish most of our, well, I may not use the word big men.
It doesn't know those things.
How I wish most of our high-level technocrats understand the issues the way he understands it. I very much appreciate his level of understanding of the issues concerning housing and urbanization. Having said that, I will also want to say that we cannot deal with this issue the way we are going about it in silos. They must have to do an integrated approach.
Yeah.
Moving forward, we must have to bring together the private and the public sector. And that is why I would advocate for a housing commission at the apex, where you have Hdan and the Council of Housing, National Council on Housing coming together to talk about housing. Of course, we cannot talk about housing without talking about the urban policy. We must have to talk about the urban development policy. That comes first, followed by the housing policy. And this brings me to mind when we talk about so many issues and we refer to the National Assembly. We are now talking about housing code, and we are talking of the National Assembly. We are still running a federation. Even if the National Assembly passes, if they pass it as a law, the states have to domesticate them. The states have to domesticate them. If they don't, we'll still have the kind of problem we are having with planning. As of now, there is a federal physical planning law known as the Nigerian Urban and Regional Planning Law. The states are supposed to domesticate this law, but how many states have domesticated this law as of today? Very few. We are still battling with them in so many states. So many states. At the last count, you may not have had up to 15 states that have domesticated this law. And without this law, you can't be talking of things like the housing code. The building code, sorry. You can't be talking of the building code because it is this law, it is under this law that you now domesticate the building code that we are preparing at the national level. So when we are talking about housing post the pandemic, we must have to look at this. We must have to have a roadmap and say, this has to be done, followed by this, followed by this, followed by that. Otherwise, one group is shouting, we need money to build houses, we need money to give those who will have these houses. At the end of the day, you will not deliver. We will continue having this situation we now have in Abuja, where we now have a situation I described like in one of those literature books we read in those days. Water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. We have housing estates all over in Abuja, yet we are talking of housing deficit. What's the problem? That means that what we have on ground, there is a mismatch. So we have to have a roadmap. We talk of our urban development policy that will dovetail into our physical development laws, building code, and so on, standards and all that. We then talk about our housing policy. This must bring the private and the public sector together, because housing, the issue of housing, must have to have the economic dimension, it has a social dimension. There are people who obviously cannot own houses. We must be talking about decent rental accommodation for them. There are people who cannot own houses except there is an element of subsidy. We shall be talking about social housing for such category of people. Quoting the ambassador again, it must have to be an integrated package, not what one person, this group is doing one thing, the other group is doing another thing. So going forward, post-COVID-19, we must have to take planning of our settlement seriously. We must have to take planning of our settlement very seriously. And that will also include upgrading of the slums. There are now so many, and the population they house, they are accommodating, is almost getting to more than 40% of the populace, and that is dangerous because slum is easily associated with crime and all that. So we need to take serious action with respect to upgrading our slums all over the country, not just in Abuja, slums all over. And we must have to, of course, that comes before even the upgrading of the plan of the slum. We must have to take the planning of our settlement very seriously.
Thank you, my president. Thank you, my president. Thank you, the president of Nigeria Institute of Town Planners. Now, I'll be going to Ambassador Akin Oyatero. Before I do that, I will read this message that I just received on the screen by Yahya Lere. Yahya Lere is the executive secretary, I think the managing director of Kaduna State Mortgage and Foreclosure Authority, and is connected to us from Kaduna. Kindly recommend to the government that part of the 500 billion post-COVID-19 intervention to housing sector should be channeled to states that have gone far in transparent legislation to excel affordability in housing for the low and medium income earners of the society, especially those states that have passed the mortgage and foreclosure law, like Kaduna State. Thank you. Just this afternoon, I got a message from this House of Assembly in Abeokuta, Ogun State. That the state has also passed the foreclosure bill into law, making the second state in Nigeria to do that. Imagine a country as big as ours does not have anything like foreclosure law. That undoubtedly has been a barrier to mortgage transaction. The report that also just got to me says that the Ekiti State is at the point of also passing it into law, while the Lagos State has passed second reading and they are reviewing it. So I go to Ambassador. Ambassador, I discovered that much need to be done by the state governments, most especially when we are running a federal system of government. I have mentioned to you what Governor Ayade did at the beginning of this program. So this subject of discussion, what do you have to say, should be the responsibility of the state government in supporting whatever thing the government is doing in the area of using housing to arrest poverty and using housing to arrest sickness or health problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Festus. When you look at the Maslow law, it says one of the three basic needs of humans is you're talking of food, housing, and clothing. Therefore, housing has, like I said, it has a lot of spiral effects, or urbanization, let's say, if it is properly planned, first of all, properly formulated, planned, formulated, and then implemented. The problem we've always had is that we have these fire service approach to most issues in our country. The time has come where we'll have to use proper policies that are evidence-based to guide our actions. Now, I do agree with TPL Lewa Zota that the time for the National Housing Commission has come, where you are going to have all stakeholders, both private and public. And part of the public stakeholders you're going to have, obviously, are states. While you're talking of the private, you have people, all the various professional associations. We're talking of Hdan, town planners, National Institute of Architects, builders, you bring developers, the mortgage banks, community-based, organizations, and off-takers. You bring all of them in. Now, you will have to start in such a system, instead of having a pyramid, we are really going to, build from the grassroots upwards. So it's not going to be bringing it from above and then forcing it down everybody's throat. When you build basically from the ground upwards, it's a more sustainable way to go about it and formulate policies, because you carry everybody along. And everybody's concern will have been taken into consideration. Therefore, when the national policy is enacted or a national legislation is enacted, everybody can easily buy into them because they were part of the formulation. And therefore, half your problem of implementation is solved. Like the national legislation that Chief Lekwa mentioned, that is yet to be domesticated. The problem you have is this, that when you are formulating these national policies or national legislations, was the states involved?
Okay.
Did you ask for their contribution?
That's it.
Most likely not. So now the way to go about it going forward is to ensure that you bring them on board in your review of the national urban policies and your review of national housing policy. Now, the good thing about housing is that housing is not on the exclusive list. It is on the concurrent list. So it means states themselves can take this on. Yes. Up. So states, even before the national policies, can enact their own domestic policies to regulate the various practices. Most of the builders, of the, the architects, the mortgage, finance givers, and other people that act on this. And like Architect Musa said, the National Housing Code or Building Code should actually be a dynamic document that you use, in regulating these practices, and you can improve them along the way. You can fine-tune them. You don't have to wait for the National Assembly either to amend or to promulgate a new one before, you can actually address the basic issue in this sector. So going to the states, what they can do is that they can come up with their own rules and regulation. They can amend them, they can renew them, or they can have a total overhaul in the face of new challenges that are arising in these sectors. So like building collapse and the rest of them, you don't have to wait for Abuja to be able to rectify that. And like Architect Musa said, where there are laws, where there are regulations and there are no sanctions, then compliance becomes, very difficult. But if there are penalties and they're implemented, then those or the practitioners will sit up and make sure that they follow the standards and they follow the various codes that are going on. Now, talking of talking of stakeholders, there is a particular sector that we keep forgetting, and that is the cooperatives. The various cooperatives we have, they have a significant role to play when it comes to provision of houses, both as financial contributors and verified off-takers. In Kenya, you have what you call the Savings and Credit Corporation, which are called SACCOs. SACCOs are major players in the housing industry and equally in the finance. Let's say you will be, it might interest you to know that they own a bank here. That's how powerful they are financially. Therefore, they can provide money for their members, either to, to pay for mortgage or to acquire their own houses. And when you are talking of houses, everybody's always talking of owning houses. We have to talk of the issue of renting equally. Not everybody will be a household now, unfortunately, but everybody could be able to rent. So to answer, the state can start practicing what they have while waiting for the reviewed national policy as a guide to implementation at various levels. I thank you.
Really, it has been a wonderful moment on this webinar discussion. I'm pleased myself with the caliber of personalities that I have on the webinar today. I must acknowledge that I'm privileged and lucky to have these great personalities as my very important guest speakers. You are highly appreciated, Ambassador. His Excellency Ambassador Akin Oyateru, for that beautiful presentation. I will take the last presentation from Emil Cohn, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Infrastructure. Emil Cohn, are you here? Emil Cohn, are you here? Emil Cohn is not here. Okay. I think he's having a problem with that network. I still have to hear from you on what.
Sorry, I'm back on.
Okay, you're with me. All right, please.
First, I'm back on.
Okay, it's your last presentation. I want to hear from you on this subject we are discussing. This will be your last presentation before I have you to make your last statement on the program. COVID-19 has brought to the fore urban planning and public health. That is what we are saying. All in agreement with that. How can the interface be strengthened? That is the interface between the urban planning and public health. We'd like to hear that from you.
Thank you, Versus. But before I take that question, let me quickly probably just give some insight to some of the statement that have been made on this platform, because I know a lot of the panelists, they I don't want to say complaining about government, but just highlighting what you all think that government should be doing. And I hear you, because the health issues that we have is particularly terrible in informal settlements. And if government is not talking, it's not because we don't know that there's a problem in that informal sector. It's just that we need to consult. Consultation is key in informal settlement. If you think that the bottom of the pyramid income class group are powerless, they are not. You will be amazed how many NGOs will come up behind them if you attempt any project that is not fully consultative. So, and then we also know, like what's happened in Lagos when the present minister of Works and Housing was governor, he tried an urban upgrade. We see with the Badia East, it wasn't probably the project that caused the demolition of what happened in Badia East, but we see the implication on the urban upgrade that he wanted to implement. It couldn't go forward because of just that court case. And then we also hear the case in Mpape, where the FCT wanted to clear Mpape, clear the slum settlement to give them a better housing. It didn't work. So we have several litigations like that all over the country. Yes, we hear you that we need to do a slum upgrade. It is necessary. It is not something you do like that. You need to consult, and consult. So we are in the process of doing that. So we're not just keeping quiet. We're doing it, but we can't say anything until we've gotten all the buy-in of the critical stakeholders. Because if you don't have buy-in, you can't start. And then if you start, you shoot yourself in the foot. So we hear you. We're not quiet. We know where it matters. And trying to spread the resources across, it shows that this particular kind of housing is key for us to look into. We are looking into it. And when the time comes when we have to talk to other stakeholders such as yourself, we'll also reach out to you. So I wanted to just put that out. And then I think the ambassador, probably the former minister, mentioned the issue of survey. The survey we are looking at that would give us the numbers we need. We've constantly touted 17 million housing deficit. Nobody knows where that originated from. I know the Minister of Housing has been contesting that number, and he is right to contest those numbers because we don't have any facts to show that a particular study was done that came up with that number of 70 million. It could have been any developmental agency that could have just thrown up that number from a model they did. Nobody knows, but we've been using those numbers. So, but what I know is that the ministry is working on a survey to get the actual deficit. We can't stop people from using those numbers because if there is a lack of numbers, verifiable numbers, there's a gap. So people just use what they see. So there's a survey currently ongoing to determine what the actual deficit for the housing sector is. So I just call on all the stakeholders to just be a bit more patient with the government. We know what to do. We may appear slow, but we just want to do the right thing so that when the numbers come out, everyone can justifiably say, yes, we have all the indicators to show you how we arrived at those numbers that we can use. So that's another point I'd like to clear. And I think the last one, yes, I would access the one from the prof when I make my statement on the question that has just been asked. So first was to answer the last question you posed at me. I would like you to recall that, or everyone on the platform to recall that we're all aware that urban planning itself is a response to a public health issue. So if we all realize that in the industrial era, urban planning was used to respond to poor living conditions in urban settlement with the proliferation of because of industrial pollution and all of that. So several down the line, a lot of the countries agree that urban planning should be implemented. So now for urban planning and public health in the past work synonymously together until countries realize that they've all used the urban planning strategy to achieve sustainable cities that they wanted. So that harmonization disintegrated because the goals of achieving, a planned sustainable city was achieved. But unfortunately, where we are right now, the world is rapidly urbanizing. And as it is urbanizing, we have WHO recently also shared some data which says that But for the last 30 years, we had like 4 out of 10 people living in the urban centers. And they projected that for 2050, they expect that about 7 out of 10 people will be in the cities. So if municipal government and the federal government do not match up that rapid urbanization with infrastructure development, we'll have a proliferation of urban settlements like what we've just discussed. So, but drilling it down to Nigeria in terms of the data, I think Prof mentioned it initially. The MDG indicators 2015 indicates that we have about 50.2 Nigerian living in a slum, urban dwellers in Nigeria living in slums. So that's a potential problem. We see it as a problem. So we now know that we need to strengthen that connection between public health and urban planning. And luckily, the government is doing it. We may not be, going out beating the drums and saying, "No, listen to what we're doing." But I know that we're trying in several aspects. And I'll share some of the points as why that makes me to say that, yes, we're actually working on these issues. So I know that the government is trying to promote, the urban planning to help in terms of healthy space and all of that. So, and then I also know that we're working on improving urban condition. Prof said earlier on in our presentation that water and sanitation matters. Yes, last year also, the president approved, TRUFEC approved that the Ministry of Water Resources should implement the end to the open defecation. And the target we have is that by 2050, we should be able to end open defecation. And open defecation, you can't achieve it without implementing a WASH program. WASH in terms of water, sanitation, and hygiene. So, and that particular open defecation is one of the reasons why we have a spread of cholera. So you see, we're working towards something as if we knew COVID would come. So already planning ahead, and putting things in place to ensure that we end open defecation by 2025. And then we're also trying to ensure that there's participatory governance. Participatory governance, I just explained what is being done in terms of engaging for the slum upgrade that you all have suggested. We don't want to rush it. We have to talk to the right people at the right time and share and hear their views on what they think their settlement, how they think their settlement should be upgraded. It can't be, I don't live in a slum, so I can't attempt to think that the ideas I have for a slum person is what the slum person would like. No, I may have an idea, but I have to go sit with the slum person to say, look, this is what I'm thinking. Do you think if we do this, it will help you have a better life? Yes, we know the provision of basic amenities, water, light, primary health care centers. It will help, to improve their living condition. But we don't want to assume, because with best intentions in the past, we tried to implement slum upgrade program, and it all ended in court cases. So we don't want to make those kind of mistakes again. So we're very, very careful now to start the bottom-up approach like the ambassador had mentioned, because it's key. You are planning something for someone that will live somewhere. He needs to tell you where the shoe hurts. So it can't be that, we are the experts, or this area needs to be demolished. Yes, you demolish it, you clear it, where do they go? And what you're going to put on ground, can they afford it? Affordability matters. And, severally we keep talking about housing deficit. Nobody is actually looking at okay, let me not say nobody's actually looking at. We are looking at it, but we're not putting a priority on the affordability, the ability of the off-takers to buy what we have on ground. We've seen it. A lot of houses empty because the people that built it did not look at that important point of saying, what I'm building, do I have off-takers that can pay for them? So that's why I'm saying that we listen, we're listening, and we're also talking to everyone.
Thank you.
So, and then the other point I also want to share is also that we were also looking at the point, of building cities that are resilient to disasters and emergencies. NEMA is there. We've seen what NEMA has tried to do. So for me, what I would try to also say here, I don't know which other of my government person might be online, but the way I see it, the same way I said, I shared my opinion on how climate change, how the world, adapted to the impact of climate change. We can also look at this, building our cities to be resilient to disasters. When we do projects and we build cities, if you go to any funder, developmental, agencies and all of that, they don't joke with the fact that you need to do an environmental impact assessment. It's key because they want to know how many people are displaced. What are your mitigations? What have you done to resettle people that have been displaced? Because everybody has to live in.
Thank you, madam.
So now, saying one more, just one last point, Festus. So what I'm saying here is that I think we also need to look at the importance of having an health impact assessment, because that would help in terms of having an urban plan fully integrate with public health. So once we have that, we are able to now give our health colleagues a seat back at the table, how they used to work before. Now we have a project, we want to expand the city. How do we subject it? What is the environment? What is the health impact assessment of that program? Is it proof? Is it covered that all the projects that we do or the city expansion that we do would not have any adverse health effect and would improve substantially on the health of the place or the district that you're trying to plan?
I want to say a very big thank you to Ime Ukon, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on infrastructure. You have done great, and I'm very happy with all your contributions. In fact, I need to tell you to pay for all the efforts you have run on this program, selling your government, forgetting that I have my own issues I can take up with you, but I will not take them up with you in this platform today. We see. Now at this point, we just go on break for just 2 minutes. I have just 7 minutes to go because my time is already fast spent. I want to go just for 3 minutes, and I will be back shortly. 3 minutes break.
Events like the Abuja International Housing Show, AIHS, is designed to create a platform for both the striving and established real estate and construction practitioners. Following the current global scourge of the coronavirus pandemic, which has made physical distancing inevitable and calls for new strategies and innovations that will meet the expectations and needs of our numerous clients, the organizers of Africa's largest housing and construction event, Abuja International Housing Show, have emerged with a virtual edition of the show. Digital AIHS 2020 is scheduled to be a 4-day event which will hold from 21st to 24th of July 2020, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily Nigerian time. The event is designed to be accessible to all participants globally via internet-connected devices such as computers, laptops, tablets, or mobile phones. This event will also be available on demand for a further 30 days after the first 5 live days. AIHS partners in not less than 15 countries will also be among participants and exhibitors. Digital AIHS 2020 will feature exhibitions held in a custom virtual environment where exhibitors will be allotted custom-built virtual booths. Attendees will also be able to engage in meaningful conversations with exhibitors using text, audio, and video chat in a 1:1 or group setting. The event will equally feature a selection of webinars delivered by leading industry experts, some of whom will field questions from the audience via Q&A sessions. The theme for this year's event is Housing Finance Innovations for 2020 and Beyond, Sustainable System for Cities. And sessions will cover a wide range of topics spanning the entire property value chain, from land acquisition to building quality. The AIHS, as usual, would be parading the highest number of professionals and government functionaries, including senators, ministers, governors, members of the House of Assembly, amongst others. It's indeed expected to be the game changer for every participant. Why a virtual AIHS event? Safest platform for linking participants from all over the world without exposing people to the risk of the coronavirus pandemic. Wider audience reach, including attendees from around the globe, giving even the smallest exhibitor the potential of accessing huge new markets. Massive cost savings for exhibitors and attendees alike. No flight, hotel, entertaining or printed brochure expenses. cost per lead is significantly lower than a conventional event. No financial or geographical barriers to visitor attendance. Significantly higher attendance than conventional events. Attend at your convenience with regular live presentations with a unique range of speakers and on-demand presentations. Immediate and controlled communication with your audience. More efficient use of time for partners, attendees, and sponsors. AIHS is the largest housing and construction conference and exhibition in Africa. The show, which is built to hold from the 21st to the 24th of July, is open for registration to participants world over. Participants are kindly urged to visit www.ihsabuja.com.
Welcome back. Now we are 5 here, and we just want to spend two minutes to see your last statement on this program. And we want to start again with the professor. Please, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. We are going to be very strict with this rule. If you go beyond 2 minutes, then we mute you. 2 minutes. Prof, start it. Last statement on the
Yes. Oh, okay. So thank you once again. We know that health is wealth. That is a well-known thing. So, but I'm a bit worried that most of the discussions are not relating to health, which I think is the major issue today. I mean, the relationship between housing and the diseases. Meanwhile, I hope at the end of the day, we'll be able to mainstream health in all our discussions. Now, WASH, that's water, sanitation, and health, should be a priority. Even now, there are guidelines already existing in WASH, which say we should wash our hands. So it's not just about COVID. Post-COVID, we should still maintain those guidelines because they will continue to keep us safe. Then there should be a synergy between town and gown in terms of research and development for data and decision making. I think this is key. We've said it before, and I continue to emphasize a more holistic approach, all inclusive, so that everybody will be on the same page. We need to work together to make this happen. And most of these policies, even as we are reviewing them, I'm calling for a more people-centered policy. We can't just be planning for people. We should carry them along from the very beginning. I think it will make a lot of difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Now, I move to the president of Nigerian Town Planners. I move to architect Musa Sanda to say his last statement on this program today.
Thank you very much, Festus, on the opportunity. I think as my last word, what we are looking at is housing and health. And this all factors into standards. I agree with one of the panelists that spoke about, you don't have to, everybody doesn't have to own a house. But in fact, for a variable mortgage system, owning a house is without it being commodified and being able to transpire a sort of time resources and so on. So what we need to do is to get the policies correct, whereby it doesn't matter whether it is your house or a rented house or a leased house or whatever, but let it have the standards of living that is good enough for you. If it is congested, you should be able to move to another one and let somebody take up this sort of housing mobility need to be built in. And all this we can only get if we get our policies and frameworks right. Whereby the idea of housing commission is also a great one. But I think one thing that we need to watch out for is that once you start having so many organizations coming in and they tend to start doing the same thing. So what needs to be done, it can be a commission, but we must have to have a platform whereby critical stakeholders, in the housing delivery system in the country come together and discuss these issues and be able to provide the solutions. We must have to start getting, because if you're talking of slums and these are all caused by lack of standards. And what brought the slums there? Carelessness. We are not paying attention to what is it, because the policies and the guidelines and this are simply either not there or not being paid attention to. These are some of the reasons why these things happen. So slums doesn't just exist on its own. You know, certain parameters push it to this. So we must have to have those. Unless we have the policies, the guidelines, and the building code, good enough, I remember that the building code doesn't need to go to the National Assembly and pass as a law. That's why it is a code. If you pass it as a law, then you are sort of restricting it. If you have a little thing that you've seen you need to change, you need to start going back. What we need is to recognize it and establish penalties for non paying attention to its demands and so on. So I think for us to be able to move forward, we must get the policies right. Yes, we have to look at urbanization holistically, and because housing systems are part of it. And unless we get the urbanization systems going correctly, you are not likely to solve the housing problem. And like I said, the government role must be specific and identified, that this is what the government is doing in terms of effective housing delivery, standard and qualitative one. The issues of health and the rest of it, they are all put in there. If you have the standards of all this correctly put together, you're not likely to start having health issues, and then you are now talking of congestions and the rest of it. It's all due to lack of obeying the standards. And sometimes some of the people, they do this because they are not really even aware of what are the standards. What are the standards? What do we need to do? So these are things that we must have to critically work on. We must make sure that we have the right policies, we have the right frameworks, we have the right codes, the right regulations to operate. And everybody can be referred to. This is what you are supposed to do. This is what you are not supposed to do. Unless we get that correct. And then, of course, the manpower input. All professionals in the built environment must start thinking as one. It's long gone for you to say, I'm architect, I'm town planner, I'm quantity surveyor, I'm this. No, we look at ourselves as built environment professionals. A very good example is where His Excellency, the ambassador, left in Kenya. I went to Kenya and all professionals are under the architect. They don't care. They call themselves built environment professionals. This unit, that unit, that unit, because whatever they are going to do, unless they have good cooperation, they're not likely to succeed. So I think this is also one area where the commission or whatever platform we put in place will bring these professionals together so that they have the understanding. Unless we think as one with common objective in trying to solve the housing delivery systems and problems in the country, you are not likely to get to the point that you want to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, former minister and former coordinator or supervisory minister for works and housing, Architect Musa Sada. Now, Ime Okon, I would like to take your last statement within 2 minutes on this webinar discussion today.
Thank you, Festus. As I mentioned earlier, at least I tried to highlight some of the policies that we have on ground to address some of the issues that you've all raised. But I still consistently hear you all talking about policies. So to me, it means there's an inherent complaint where you guys are trying to get the government to do more, and do more means enforce. So I hear you. So we will try to enforce most of those policies that we have on ground. But Festus, let me say one thing very quickly. Because of the rapid urbanization and the fact that as long as informal home dwellings will continually be an issue which we have to address, this we should further interrogate. I think it should be one, we should probably have a webinar on this to further interrogate the nexus between, urban planning and public health, because you need a total topic on it. So probably because we need innovative ideas. We need innovative ideas on how we can, ensure that these two sectors are married again. the way they used to be. Remember those days when we were growing up? I recall very vividly in Lagos where we had this wole, the health inspectors, we used to call them wole. They used to come to the house to check how your environment is. So perhaps this is the time we need to bring them back to the table. So we can't allow COVID to get us as a nation. So we will try, the public sector, private sector, state government, everybody would work together to ensure, we will try to work together to ensure that COVID does not get us as a nation. Rather, we will try to strengthen all the policies, the regulation, and all the laws we have on ground to ensure that all of them are COVID-proof. So thank you very much, Festus, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the government.
Now, Ambassador Hakim Oyatero, be the last person to speak on this program today.
Thank you so much, Festus. COVID is a problem, but COVID equally is an opportunity.
Thank you.
For me, COVID is an opportunity and a wake-up call for the housing sector to get things right. For too long, we've got too many things wrong in the housing sector. We've been operating in silos. The time has come to collapse the silos. Therefore, the commission to be put in place as a matter of urgency. And I will advise the government, and I'm talking straight to Ime, the time has come to declare a housing emergency in Nigeria. The time has come, that is the truth. If 60% of our people who live in the urban areas live as some dwellers, we have a serious problem. It means we are actually tying down a lot of economic potentials. It means we're incubating a lot of area for crime. It means we're incubating a lot of area for non-education of a large percentage of our children. Like I said, all these are interconnected. Let the commission be that platform that articulates and elaborates policies, create and decentralize and have another forum where all stakeholders, both public and private, we interact, and then be able to review policy. But all our policies must be backed by appropriate legislation, rules, regulation, and of course by data. And I say lastly, let's carry all consulting with a lot of people, and that we create and craft an urban policy that actually makes urbanization not only a social, but equally an economic. So urbanization should be a social economic sustainer of our economy. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
I can hear you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. We have come to the end of today's webinar discussion on the subject, housing as a governance tool and legislative response to poverty and disease control. I'd like to make this announcement that by next week, Tuesday, we'll be having one-on-one webinar interview with the Senate Chairman Committee on Housing and one or two of his members to tell us what they are doing in the area of housing. And beyond that, we shall be having a one-on-one webinar with the Governor Ayade of Cross River State to tell us the motive behind his social housing policy. We will also be bringing commissioners for housing together to tell us how they be responding to COVID-19 challenges in the area of affordable housing. It is necessary for me to put on record that every of your discussions here can be on any of the social media, in any of the newsprints, and on television. But be rest assured that your interest is perfectly protected. So I want to say a very big thank you to Ime Okon, the Senior Special Assistant to the President of Infrastructure, thank you for responding to our invitation. I remember at once I sent you a message, you responded, and you said that this is a call to duty and that you will do it. I appreciate you publicly for responding immediately. My own architect Musa Sadas has several times visited your office to seek advice, get support. You have always been around me. You have been a great mentor. Thank you for your service to this great nation. Where people like you are going to stop is where we are going to continue. And let it be on the record that we continue to knock your door for one support or the other. Thank you for responding to our invitation to be on this program today. I must also thank Professor Immaculata. I just met you, and that yesterday I added you to our housing group. It's a new journey between two of us. I know you want to say much about heads. Come, I'm going to get you more opportunity to speak out on those issues that you wanted to tell the whole world. On behalf of my team, I say thank you to you. I remember it was just a message they sent to you and you responded. I want to say publicly that we appreciate your response. I want to say thank you to the president of Nigeria Total Planners. I know the network has made him to go. I think he was calling from Abia State. I want to say a very big thank you to you in case you are still connected. We appreciate your being around on this program today. Ambassador Akinyoyatero, you have been a father for a very long time. Your son is my friend and my brother. But every time I see your contributions, I was told by some of my colleagues what you did when you were representing the United Nigeria at the UN Habitat. But unfortunately, you may not know that the young boys have your report. It is that report we have that makes us to be following you. We say thank you for your contribution, selfless service to your great nation. But have it in mind, despite the white hair everywhere, we still continue to call you for duty. So, this is the end of today's webinar discussion, and I hereby declare the webinar meeting closed. Bye to all our participants who have been wonderful, our media team. Thank to you all. Bye for now.
Thank you, Festus. Take care.
Thank you, Festus.
Thank you, sir.
Events like the Abuja International Housing Show, AIHS, is designed to create a platform for both the striving and established real estate and construction practitioners. Following the current global scourge of the coronavirus pandemic, which has made physical distancing inevitable and calls for new strategies and innovations that will meet the expectations and needs of our numerous clients, the organizers of Africa's largest housing and construction event, Abuja International Housing Show, have emerged with a virtual edition of the show. Digital AIHS 2020 is scheduled to be a 4-day event which will hold from 21st to 24th of July 2020, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily Nigerian time. The event is designed to be accessible to all participants globally via internet-connected devices such as computers, laptops, tablets, or mobile phones. This event will also be available on demand for a further 30 days after the first 5 live days. AIHS partners in not less than 15 countries will also be among participants and exhibitors. Digital AIHS 2020 will feature exhibitions held in a custom virtual environment where exhibitors will be allotted custom-built virtual booths. Attendees will also be able to engage in meaningful conversations with exhibitors using text, audio, and video chat in a 1:1 or group setting. The event will equally feature a selection of webinars delivered by leading industry experts, some of whom will field questions from the audience via Q&A sessions. The theme for this year's event is Housing Finance Innovations for 2020 and Beyond, Sustainable System for Cities. And sessions will cover a wide range of topics spanning the entire property value chain, from land acquisition to building quality. The AIHS, as usual, would be parading the highest number of professionals and government functionaries, including senators, ministers, governors, members of the House of Assembly, amongst others. It's indeed expected to be the game changer for every participant. Why a virtual AIHS event? Safest platform for linking participants from all over the world without exposing people to the risk of the coronavirus pandemic. Wider audience reach, including attendees from around the globe, giving even the smallest exhibitor the potential of accessing huge new markets. Massive cost savings for exhibitors and attendees alike. No flight, hotel, entertaining or printed brochure expenses. Cost per lead is significantly lower than a conventional event. No financial or geographical barriers to visitor attendance. Significantly higher attendance than conventional events. Attend at your convenience with regular live presentations with a unique range of speakers and on-demand presentations. Immediate and controlled communication with your audience. More efficient use of time for partners, attendees, and sponsors. AIHS is the largest housing and construction conference and exhibition in Africa. The show, which is built to hold from the 21st to the 24th of July, is open for registration to participants world over. Participants are kindly urged to visit www.ihsabuja.com.